The global elite have far more control over us than most people would dare to imagine. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, you probably agree that the global elite has so much power and influence. It was said, money is power, and today it seems more true than ever. Those at the top of pyramid set the rules of the game for the rest of us, and there is not much the rest of us can do about it. When we talk about how the global elite rule our lives, the focus focuses on how they influence national governments. But the truth is that this is one of the areas where the global elite has the least control. I know this may sound odd, but I believe things will be clearer by the end of this podcast. I argue that corporations are the primary means the elite use to control our lives. In fact, many global companies are now larger and stronger than most national governments, and the global network of companies that collectively dominate the planet is much larger and much more powerful than a single national government. A few years ago, a remarkable study was conducted that looked closely at the interconnected relationships of major companies around the world. This study found that a network of 1,318 huge companies dominated the global economy, and also found that the 147 giant companies at the center of that network form a super asset that controls 40% of the entire network. Each of the 1,318 had ties to 2 or more other companies, and on average they were connected to 20. What's more, although they represented 20% of global operating revenues, the 1,318 appeared to collectively own through their shares the majority of the world's large blue chip and manufacturing firms, the real economy representing a further 60% of global revenues. When the team further untangled the web of ownership, it found much of it tracked back to a super entity of 147 even more tightly knit companies. All of their ownership was held by other members of the super entity that controlled 40% of the total wealth in the network. In effect, less than 1% of the companies were able to control 40% of the entire network, says Glatfelder. Most were financial institutions. The top 20 included Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase & Co., and the Goldman Sachs Group. John Driffill of the University of London, a macroeconomics expert, says the value of the analysis is not just to see if a smaller number of people controls the global economy, but rather its insights into economic stability. Concentration of power is not good or bad in itself, says the Zurich team, but the coarse tight interconnections could be. As the world learned in 2008, such networks are unstable. If one company suffers distress, says Glatfelder, this propagates. It's disconcerting to see how connected things really are, agrees George Sugihara of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in La Jolla, California, a complex systems expert who has advised Deutsche Bank. Of course, at the top are ultra-rich individuals who own and control the huge corporations that make up the super asset. That's why all of our big companies seem to have the same values. At the top, their ownerships are all interconnected, so it's almost impossible to fundamentally change the culture of these huge institutions. Many supported the idea of refusing to engage in this beast economically, but this became almost impossible. Over the years, we have seen many promising companies being swallowed up by this super asset, And in many cases, the customers of these companies are no longer even aware that they belong to others. Because they have such a large share of the market, the global elite mainly dictates what to produce, what to sell, and what to buy. And if you need a loan to buy a home or another major purchase, you normally have to go to one of their financial institutions. But of course, it does not stop here. Politicians love to talk about job creation, but the truth is that our really big companies hold the key to who works where. When I was younger, I made very clear who I was and what I believed in my resume. What a mistake that was. If you want to be recruited by the elite, it should look like you share their values and will be a good little gear in the machine. And the elites guarantee that they will have an endless supply of good little wheels by fully and completely mastering our higher education system, while the colleges and universities that had done as the elite wished were definitely showered with money. Others were allowed to go to the roadside. At this point, a college education will look pretty much the same wherever you go, and this is extremely unfortunate. After leaving school, the elite continue to control what we think, with almost all the major media and entertainment companies owned. Today, more than 90% of the news and entertainment we receive from our televisions is produced by massive media empires, and the average American spends about 5 hours a day in front of the television. If you allow someone to feed propaganda in your mind for 5 hours a day, that will have a tremendous impact on how you view the world. You can try switching to a different channel than you normally watch, but that will not change much. Have you ever wondered why the news are always the same no matter which channel you're watching? Needless to say, this does not happen by chance. In the early years, the internet allowed alternative voices to compete with giant media empires. But now, this is changing rapidly. As the giant companies now control most of the internet, these companies can silence opposing voices by spreading. Bright lights are popping up all over the internet one by one. And in the end, the only audio left will be enterprise-approved voices. The constitution governing our country should guarantee freedom of expression. But companies that have full control of our lives now control most of the online public squares, and they have made it very clear that they will dictate what can and cannot be said. So you can still go to your backyard and say whatever you want, but at this point in this country, freedom of expression is dead for all practical purposes. Are you beginning to understand the strength they have? President Trump can't control what you say, but big corporations do it every day. And unlike our politicians, we cannot get rid of companies on the bailout. Regardless of what happens in November, the global elite will continue to dominate our society. But if we stay on the path that they took us down, our future will be extremely bleak. Voices like mine will continue to awaken people, but when the other side has almost unlimited resources, it's a very difficult war to fight. However, we can never give up, because as long as companies owned by the global elite fully dominate our society, we will never be truly free.
Dear Daily News Report viewers, you can find other videos by clicking on the top right button. We recommend watching, subscribing, and sharing. Thanks in advance.
Most of the idea, comment, information, and criticism containing in these videos have been created by Daily News Report. Before making any important investment decision, use the information contained in these videos as a starting point for conducting your own research. If you make any investment or legal decision, it is advised to consult an expert before making this decision.